Dura immoo akkuma jettan kana obbo Battee du'a isaati irratti gaddanatti dhagame argisiisa. Isa duratti waan tokko jechuu barbaada. Waan jechuu barbaadu ani obbo Battee qaamalleen argee hin beeku, korrespoondillee wajji godhee hin beeku, garuu nama kana yeroo tokko arge. Yeroo TV irratti argu, proogiraama tokko irratti yoo argu, baay'ee natti tolee, baay'ee gammadee, baay'ee ittiin boone jechuu dandeettan. He is one of the most confident, very intelligent, well-read, articulate person. Dhugaa dubbanneetiin jenna eenyu isaan beeku. Gaafa tokko beetanii gaafa tokko TV bunnaa shaayii jedhu tokko irratti yayyaamanii yaada garaa kaasanii dubbatanii achi keessatti yoo argu namni seera laalessu saniif warri impaayara warri Oromoo jibbu namni mootummaa kanas gargaaru fee waan inni jiru harka dedanii harkaanis ta'uu barbaadan natti fakkaata. Kana mara moo'atee he won the battle of ideas. Yaada kiliirii qabaa, yaada dhugaa qabaa, nama goota guddaa jechuu barbaade. Isa dhabuun immoo waan baay'ee garaa nama nyaatu. Kana isaaf immoo rabbi jannata isaa fidu warra isaatillee rabbi haa barsiisuu barbaada. Ani immoo jechuu barbaadu beetanii waan tokko jira. Waan ijoollummaatti nutti himanii jaarsota irraa barreesse tokko waayyaa jedhan tokkotti jira. Ani dura ijoollummaatti riisarchii yoo jalqabu jaarsa tokko Oromoon bakka dur jiru sanii maa deemee jedhee gaafadhe. Maaliif achi deemanii biyya gara faffaca'anii jedhee gaafannaani Oromoon biyya jiru lejandii dheebaa dhugaatti fudhatina. Lejandii jechuun waan kun namni namatti himu beetanii bineensa tokkotu jira. Yayyii fakkaata namni ajjeesuu hin danda'u namaan gabbaranii naan jedha. Bara baraan dhufeen nama nu harkaa nyaataa, bara maraa nyaataa ajjeesuu hin danda'amu maal goonaa jedhanii yaadanii jedhan. Jennaani yayyii kana ajjeesuu hin dandeenyu bara baraan nama gabbarraa eega akkanatti si gabbaru manna jalaa baqannaa jedhan. Jalaa baqatu kaanii achi kaanii biyya gara faffacaanee jedha. Kana jechuun maal na achisitti fakkaate impaayar Itoophiyaa yayyii san taatee jechuu kiyya. Uddesiin kaatee bara baraan nama gabbarraa yoo lakkoftaniitiin jettan udda impaayar Itoophiyaa kaate bara waggaa 150 bara sabistee jedhanii Haayile Sillaasee irraa jalqabe nama goota nyaataa turte. Ka maqaan beeynetu jira, ka maqaa beeynetu jira. Amma oduu fagoon jabaatin ani fagoo dubbachuu danda'a. Kama waggaa namichi Abii jedhan kun dhufe nama 4 dhabnee jechuun nama 4 gurguddaa dhabnee akkuma namni martuu beeku tokko nama beekamaa tokko namni hagammaa baay'ee waan isaan dubbannee nama Daadhii Galaan jedha nama bareedaa sirbu. Hagammaa namni isa waan dubbannee Abdul Jabbaar Hacaaluu deebi'aati immoo amma dheengadda kunoo nama akkana dhabnee waggaan isaan gabbarraa jechuudha. Agartanii waggaan impaayara gabbaruu jechuun goota keessa buuranii nama isaanii ajajamumaan mataa laafaa walitti akka barbaadan. Beeytanii Oromoon saba guddaa but we are dependent majority. Dependent subordinated majority kana. Wanni isaan godhuu barbaadan goota keessaa fixanii ka qalbii qabu keessaa fixanii subordinated majority ka jedhamu. Subordinated majority akka ta'u barbaadanii ka ergatan ka gaafa barbaadan irratti ergan barbaadanii jechuudha. Kana waan ta'eef kanaan dura calqabaa lammata immoo achitti wani dubbadhaan jettanii I think I have to speak this one in English. Maybe it's the best way to express in English. The title of the conference is The Legacy of Menelik's Empire. The Legacy of Menelik. What's legacy? Legacy is simply the long-lasting impact of a particular event. In this case, Menelik's conquest, Menelik's administration, and the consequent regimes since around 1900. That means that now, whenever we talk about empires, then we have to simply make abstraction about empires. What is an empire? What is imperial legacy? Is there a good empire? Is there an empire which can leave a positive legacy? There is none. There is very interesting story I may share with you about empires because I have been doing for many years on the idea of empires. When Europeans colonized Africa, so they came with the idea of white man's burden. They came with the idea of civilizing mission, and they wanted to elevate, according to them, the Africans from darkness. And then when colonialism ended around 1960s, they started to say, let us review our colonial system, what we achieved, what we did for these people. You see, guess what? They met in Belgium, a country called Belgium, in Brussels city. So all colonizers simply talked about what they did, what they achieved, what they did for Africans and how they made changes and so on and so on. So after a while, The debate continued. The French simply said their system was the best. The British, the Belgians. There was a Frenchman whose name was Deschamps, who used to be governor of Madagascar, who spoke the last. You see, brothers, we all said we did good things, but we are bad. Colonialism is bad because when people goes the time, no one said we are nice. No one simply asked us to stay, which simply means when people goes the opportunity, then they all asked us to leave, which means colonialism was bad. Colonialism is about us, about the empire builders, and therefore there is nothing positive we did because many people didn't appreciate what we did. That's why we had to leave. So in the same way, Ethiopia had nothing to give, nothing to teach. And so I call it dependent empire, dependent colonial empire, who didn't have technology, who didn't have science, who didn't have even food to eat. The reason for Habasha colonization was food. So it is simply an empire of hungry men and hungry women. And therefore, I call it Impara Kabela. So it's only comparable to Belgium, and Belgium is simply the dependent empire. That's why, of course, it simply succeeded in keeping Ethiopia simply without European empires could not have survived, could not have created in any way. So I don't see any positive legacy coming from Ethiopian empire, including Menelik, Haile Selassie. All the empires mostly is about exploiting, humiliating Oromos as slaves, as gabbars, and also as naturally. One of the things I think Professor Asafa and Professor Muhammad clearly indicated, and therefore I don't want to go into details. And so what they did was simply to undermine, to simply demean our people, to insult, to simply take off their land and pushing them around like slaves. One of the things about the Ethiopian empire, they never considered the Oromos as even humans. By the way, when they were expanding the empire to the RC country, Menelik himself saw the women were massacred, men were massacred, elderly were mutilated, and so he asked his soldiers, why you had to kill all these people? I asked you to kill, but why you had to kill all these people? You see, we didn't kill people, but we killed Aramanes. So the title they gave to our people is simply Aramanes. So I, based on my research and reading of the works of my colleague, I simply came to the conclusion that the Menelik empire was a genocidal empire. It's based on violence. It's based on, of course, humiliation of human beings. And what is happening now is nothing new. It is simply the continuation of what happened during Menelik's time. So for the RC, obviously, I don't want to really repeat. I don't want to really talk about this. For example, what happened in 1986, especially 1886, the last campaign of Menelik was a very planned, well-organized plan of massacre and humiliation of people. So there are two things they used. One is, of course, intelligence. That means using Oromos to simply cheat, deceive the Oromos to submit. So there were three people who were used. One was Birbirsa Barara. The second one, of course, was Ali Mare, who cheated people to organize a war at Azule. And the other one who introduced, actually, his name is Sheikh Busari, apparently a fluent Oromo speaker, probably from Mollo, who apparently introduced disease, infectious disease, which wiped out the entire population in the East. So they used both guns, which they accumulated from Europeans, and also they used disease, which simply killed. Actually, I have a kine to share with you. The kine was sung by an Amara soldier in Gin'ir after they introduced the disease. This kine is not coming from Motak Oranios, it comes from Bali. So this simply what they said. If you want to interpret it, he said, Kifu bashita antiche, lagar lazamat salchiche, ahum bashita lakonyal, ras hodaketonyal. Ras means ras targe, ras means head. And so that means they simply admitted that they introduced the disease, which also affected them. So that means the Menelik Empire was a colony, not only a colonial empire, which are nothing to teach, which are nothing to give, but also they mistreated people. For the Anole incident was naturally unprovoked incident where simply they gathered people in the name of peace, eventually to mutilate, to humiliate people. So mutilating of hands and limbs is not new. It started with Tedros, and Menelik was there at the time of his custody and learned to impact this. So what happened after that was mostly a continuation of empires. Empires are also mostly about land, as many of you know, land was taken 80%, 90% of the land was taken. The Gadaa system was destroyed. There is no way that they could keep the Gadaa system in place. RC didn't have another institution, at least in Macha, they have kingdoms. They were kings. In RC, there was nothing other than the Gadaa system which allowed to raise the RC hundreds of thousands of combatants to fight Menelik. So the Gadaa system was destroyed. The Oromo were not allowed to go to pilgrimage, which simply to destroy Oromo unity. One of the things I think is the legacy of empire, not only the legacy of poverty and deprivation, because our people feeding hungry men and hungry Makwarid class without eating it, without feeding their own children. And so one of the longest legacy, of course, mostly, we simply induced in us what we call inferiorized identity. That means we are still under the hegemony of the Ethiopian empire, which reduced our people as subordinate, who simply are ready to self-abnegate. And today, as our brother said, now the Oromo are teaching us that we don't have history, or the only history we have is simply the one we worked with the Amhara people. That means the war fighting Adwa, where they forcefully mobilized people to fight, and also by simply insulting the memory of our people, our heroes, Taddasa Birru, Wako, and many more, because for them that represents the history of Ente. And of course, the history we have is simply nothing other than the imperial history. So for today, I think we thought that with this government, we simply at least moved something forward. Of course, we always believed we get something because we had nothing to lose. When Ethiopia revolution came, it was seen as the Oromo revolution. Actually, we didn't win much because the Ethiopian government was dominated by the Amhara hegemony, by the Amhara power. Then when the Tigrayans came, also we thought that we want something, but then still we were subordinated majority serving the imperial leaders. Now, when we thought that the Oromo came to power, actually they became worse. So they are insulting our memories. They are killing our heroes. I don't have any proof to say that these individuals killed by the government. It was very likely that the government organized people who do not agree with him. So when we talk about the Ethiopian empire, then the Oromo would simply cannot claim that anyone cannot claim that we want anything from this empire. The empire is still dominant, and they wanted to pull back where we were before. And of course, the more it changes, the more it's the same thing. And therefore, the Oromo have to ask themselves, what do we expect from this government? So we couldn't simply win by peaceful means. There's no chance of getting Oromo leaders to be elected. The people who really represent the Oromo people cannot get elected because this person who was killed was not armed. He was naturally expressing his views by peaceful means. He was making arguments. If he is killed, then who can win elections in this country by peaceful means? So the Oromo have to think about where we can go from here. Should we continue as a subordinated majority, where even the people who rule in our name simply kill our people? For how long we can tolerate these people? And so I think we have to collectively decide, at least we have to be one, if we are one. But one of the difficulties, one of the problems the Ethiopian empire did since the creation of the Shoan government was, as may say, the demography, the Amhara Oromo, the Amhara of Shah were inferior to the Tulamas. The reason why they defeated the Tulama first was they simply made them to fight one another. Then they used the Tulama warriors to fight against other people. Still, they are simply making us to fight against one another. So one of the difficulties on which we didn't overcome over many decades was simply our division. I heard a few months ago, there were Neftanya individuals who met here in Washington and who simply argued it's still possible to divide the Oromos. So that means they wanted to put the Oromo on their side in order to simply get power, because still they believe that Abiy is not doing what he's expected to do. He's not at least accelerating the process as they wanted. Maybe Abiy doesn't want to create the kind of empire they wanted. He wanted to simply create the version of Menelik's empire in his own name. And therefore, when they said we can divide Oromos, it's still possible to divide Oromos. It's still what my fear is simply there is still a possibility of dividing Oromos because we are not sufficiently united, we are not sufficiently conscious, and of course that's why I think the Oromo need to overcome our differences. Still, there are people who may be having sympathy for the Fanos, no? To get some power. So that is simply the way they dominated us. Simply, we are still under hegemony, as one writer said, when the mind is colonized, the body follows. I think this is what's happening to us. Hopefully, we'll not stay here. Our people must be united. Our people must be free. How is it? Why we have 50 million people having the best resources in the country continue to be dominated, continue to be humiliated, continue to be pushed around? For how long they continue to burn our houses? For how long they simply mistreat the body? One of the saddest things, not only killing someone, but mistreating the body, as they did to Bate and so on. One of the Oromo culture, by the way, one of the beautiful culture, even when people die, we deal with dignity. We bury with dignity. One of the regretting you have when someone dies, there's no one around to simply treat his body rightly. So this idea of violence, of course, going back to Menelik's legacy, and of course, will not be surprised discontinuing. Hopefully, our people find a way to come out of this situation. And so I don't want to go into more details about what happened about Ethiopian empire. So this is simply an empire. There was a revolution. The country remained an empire. It was dominated by the Amhara during Dervish regime, and the Tigrayans took over. They dominated it. And then, of course, the Oromo came. The Oromo, as Haberline said, simply Oromo speaking Amharas came to power. Not Oromos coming to power. Oromo speaking Amharas coming to power. So that is exactly the difficulty we have. So I will end my discussion with one important thing which I came across, because when I meet people, of course, I often listen to people, what people say. I saw one of the leading Ethiopian scholars in Paris before coming to Canada, and at the time, 5 or 6 years after the TPLF came to power, and asked him about the situation in Ethiopia. So he told me about the situation, and so it is Lagizeno, Guddau, Nimalasan, he said. So I asked him, we'll come back just for a while. What about Oromos? እነሱ ማየት ይሄዳሉ። ጉዳዩ በእኛ መካከል ነው። They have nowhere to go. The struggle is between us, between the Tigrayans and of course the Hamaras, because the Oromo was always Dangatur. You know Dangatur in Amharic, so it's been blood like me. Dangatur Mul Ajabi, those simply who are commanded, who are led, pushed around by the Tigrayans, by the Amhara. So the Abiy government is now simply elevating the history of servants, Italaratiochin Tarik. And then, of course, he is trying to bury the history of our heroes. So the Oromo have to come together and, of course, move forward, how to simply come out of this situation, vicious cycle which was created by Menelik and his successors. Thank you very much. And I'm happy to discuss if you have questions. And I didn't have really a written because my paper is more theoretical one. And I wanted to make it simple because if we do theoretical discussion in conference, not easy to do. Galatoma, abag wana lagay fatanin mo graphic awata wato kusini Davis ay chumar bata ulfada.